Hello, I'm Joel Hargis with the Florida Aviation Network. We are at Sun and Fun here in 2024. Very special Sun and Fun this year because it's the 50th anniversary. And so it's just amazing that this air show has, gone on for 50 years, and I hope we've got 50 more. Sun and Fun is about all kinds of different things. It's about seeing new airplanes. It's about seeing old airplanes. But one of the things that Sun and Fun offers as you attend the show is there's a lot of seminars on safety. And safety is paramount in aviation. And I am delighted to introduce Jeff Edwards, who is a safety expert. In talking to you, I would say you are a safety expert. And so, Jeff, you've got a super interesting career, and I got to touch on a little of it. I mean, you were a Navy aviator.
A6 bombardier, yeah.
A6, and he's, which is a carrier pilot.
Bombardier. So we sat side by side.
Right.
He took care of driving. I took care of all the rest.
Right. And you got over 300 traps on a carrier?
Yes.
Which is always exciting, particularly at night.
Really exciting at night.
Really exciting. Every carrier pilot I've ever spoke to says the exact same thing.
Yeah.
Never get used to that.
No, you never do.
But that's not what we're here to talk about.
No.
We're here to talk about aviation safety. And, I mean, you've worked with the NTSB. You're an expert witness on a regular basis, working for several manufacturers. But I think the thing you really want to share is your efforts with the JAHSC. Is that right?
That's correct, yes.
So tell everybody, what is the JAHSC?
Well, the JAHSC is an effort that started back around 2011. Actually, it was a reconstituted group of folks emanating out of the safety organization within the FAA. And they had done the same program with the commercial airline side. And what they did was they gathered together experts in the industry, aviation industry, on government side. So in our group, we have NASA, the NTSB advises, folks from the FAA, different parts of the FAA are involved, EAA, AOPA, and a lot of organizations like mine, the Lancer Owners and Builders Organization, both flight instructor organizations here nationally participate. So you have all these experts participate, as well as manufacturers like Textron, Beech, Continental Motors, Lycoming has participated in several of these different projects.
Oh, okay.
And so what they've tried to do is they've gone through and they've looked at thousands of accidents. So the first set through that we went through was called loss of control, stall spins.
Okay. All right.
And we studied stall spin accidents for probably 2-3 years. And we had loss of control 1, loss of control 2. And so out of that came recommendations on how do we mitigate or reduce that. Give you a couple examples. One was we recommended to the FAA that they permit pilots or owners to put angle of attack systems in their aircraft without going through a big, expensive STC project, okay,
Right.
which became known as NORSI.
Okay.
You can look up what NORSI means. I can't even remember what the acronym means. But then the other one was, beyond that, beyond angle of attack, was a recommendation to the FAA. You see this here at Sun and Fun, is you're trying to line up a whole bunch of people and get them on the runway as quickly as possible. Oshkosh, it's land on the orange dot, the red dot, whatever. The problem is when the pilots and the aircraft get bunched up, then they start saying do S-turns. And so what we were seeing was a number of accidents, S-turns on final at Oshkosh. We said, hey, this is not a good idea. Just send them around, okay? And rather than risk another one of these accidents at Oshkosh. So those are kind of some of the things that we did. So we've progressed through a number of these study groups within the JAHSC, looking at engine, loss of power in engines, looking at, my group right now is looking at safety culture. And we were talking a little bit about that earlier.
And here's one of the stats, and we talked about that, and I asked you to verify what I thought, and you did, that all of the aviators out there, what we need to realize is 80 to 90% of all GA accidents are pilot error. Something we did wrong, not the airplane. Mechanicals are just 10% or maybe a little more. The rest of it's on us, right?
Right.
And so that's a big number.
Right.
And so, I mean, it seems logical that training's involved in that.
Exactly. Training is key. And so about the time I joined the JAH back in around 2011, I was going back through the academic world, and I got interested in, and about a few years prior to that, myself and 4 other folks founded the Lancer Owners and Builders Organization, which is a type club for Lancers. I'd been a member, still am, of the Bonanza Society. I've been a member of the Cirrus Owners and Pots Association for years because they're a client. I want to understand what's going on in their community. So my interest in the academic study was, is there a difference between pilots who belong to a type club like COPA or Bonanza Society and ours, and the pilots that have the exact same make and model airplane that don't belong? And amazingly enough, there's a very significant difference. Pilots that belong to associations like that are 2 times less likely to be involved in an accident.
So that's a very significant statistic. I mean,
it is.
Just belonging to the group, manufacturing group, or, you know,
the type club,
right? You're how much less?
2 times.
Less likely to have a fatal accident.
Yeah. So I looked at 20,000 pilots in that group, thousands of aircraft, 3 type clubs, and the results were consistent across the type clubs.
Just joining the club.
Just join the club. So the question is why? Well, the reason is because type club members share important information with each other. Back in the day, it was a magazine came to your house, you read the magazine, you learned a few things. Today, it's much different. We're online, we're chatting with each other online, we're exchanging information, but the type club is the central focus of that effort. We still have today, organizations have their fly-ins, et cetera, where they bring in other folks from outside to talk about weather, icing, aircraft maintenance, et cetera. So there's a lot of exchange of information that's promoting that safety message. It's not a direct safety message. If you do this, you'll be safer. No, it's how to take care of your airplane, how to take care of yourself, how to be a better pilot. So these are the important things that help drive it down. Now, the question is, do pilots join, become safer, or do they join because they are safer? And it's really a chicken-egg problem.
Right. Well, I see that in fast safety meetings all the time.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I'm very active on my own airport, and I see mostly the same faces there month after month.
Right.
And then I know who probably ought to be there, who I never see there, irregular flyers, da-da-da-da-da.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I get it. Are you safer because you're there, or are you?
Yeah, you learn a little bit by attending, but how do you get the non-folks? And that's where we are today in the JAJSC, is we're studying from a safety culture standpoint the differences between these 2 groups of pilots, the ones that join and the ones that don't join. The other added benefit of belonging to these organizations is many of them run their own flight training programs. So we started our flight training program in 2009, and we were seeing lots and lots of accidents. I met with Mel Cintron, who was an executive in the FAA down here in 2009, and he said, if you guys get a program together, we'll back off, because in 2008 we had 11 fatal accidents in a small community that killed 19 people. And so there's a lot of pressure on us to do something. So we wrote a training program, recruited instructors. Since 2009 to now, we've had 43 fatal accidents in our community. Of the people we trained, our instructors trained, nobody has been involved in a fatal accident. As a matter of fact, there have been about 6 or 7 accidents of our membership that have been trained, but everybody got the plane down successfully, mainly engine problems.
Mechanicals, sure.
And nobody got seriously hurt.
That That's great. And one of the other items we discussed is you get into bigger, faster planes, jets, turboprops, things like that. You have to get a type rating in the plane.
Yes.
But in GA, if you're flying a Bonanza or a Mooney or a Lancer, all you need is a high performance endorsement and a complex endorsement. And if you take training, it is not because you're required to take training, it's because your insurance company requires you to take training, right? So they know how important it is.
Yeah, we see a lot of that in our community where the insurance company requires training when they're getting into, say, the Lancer 4P, the pressurized, the Evolution, pressurized turbine, et cetera, that they require completion of our training course, which generally in our community takes anywhere from 15 to 20 hours of training, and then a lot of ground training. So, but what a person should be looking for is an instructor who's an expert and has a lot of experience in that airplane.
Right.
The average instructor that's out there teaching Part 61 has never seen that airplane before, is not somebody that's an expert in your airplane.
Yeah, I know that from the Mooney world, and finding a Mooney instructor is hard to do.
Right. Yeah, it is. And, and we see the same thing in our community is I'll get calls from folks that want training in a Lancer, and a particular model Lancer. So we have 11 different models. And now we have about, a dozen instructors, but they're scattered across the country. Right. And so, and a lot of them are willing to travel to a location to do training. And so we generally try to work that out so we can get an instructor with that person, because we know from experience they're very vulnerable in that first 100 hours, especially the first 25 hours of flying, as they don't know anything about its performance characteristics, whatever. If we can get them with an instructor early on, preferably before they start flying, we can drive that number down, the accident rate down quite a bit.
So one of the other things we touched on earlier when we were meeting prior to being on the air was experimental and home built.
Right.
And the rules required are not necessarily the best way to get to know your airplane.
Right.
Particularly in phase 1 testing, right?
Right.
And so share with our viewing audience what you shared with me about phase 1 training when you kind of do it on your own versus getting an instructor that knows that airplane.
That's a good question, good segue. So during our work with the FAA, I mentioned Mel earlier, was what I was noticing and looking at our data was we were losing a lot of pilots, a lot of airplanes in phase 1. So phase 1, you have to prove the aircraft's airworthiness in the first 25 hours. Previously, the FAA would not permit you to fly with anybody else. It was solo, okay? So of course, if you built your airplane,
you don't have a choice.
You want to be the guy flying it, right?
Yeah.
And so it's your baby. So in a meeting in DC, we convinced the FAA with the data that we had, said, look at all the people we're losing in phase 1. We think that if you let us put a qualified pilot like Joel, who has a lot of experience in this experimental aircraft in the cockpit with that builder, we think we can drive down the accident rate.
For sure.
So we worked with the FAA and EAA to write an advisory circular to permit us to do that. And so we came up with the concept of the qualified pilot and what kind of qualifications, experience in that aircraft should they have. It's in an advisory circular right now. We beta tested that program, and the advisory circular was released in 2014. Since then, nobody in the Lancer community has been involved in a fatal crash in phase 1 since that came out. So the efficacy of these kinds of things are very important to go back and look at the results. You recommended this, you implemented this, and the results are this. So if you keep going down that path of studying your data, you get to good results.
I get it. So now if you do a home built, right, in phase 1, you can take a pilot with you?
Yes, if you follow the guidelines in AC, I think it's 90-114. It's called the Additional Pilot Program. And the guidelines spell out what the qualifications for that additional pilot are. It's not just your neighbor. It's not just the guy down the road who is a
Right.
pilot, they have to meet certain criteria.
Okay.
And it's not terribly difficult to find somebody with those qualifications.
Yeah, some of the builders are relatively new pilots. You know,
Sure.
They may have a private pilot's license or an LSA license,
Mm-hmm.
but they're very low time, and they love building as much as they do flying.
Right.
But I'm glad to hear there's a rule out there now that they
Yeah.
don't have to fly.
Right.
I mean, you're a test pilot, for crying out loud.
Yeah,
and if you're not a good pilot and you go straight from, low time pilot to test pilot, that kind of screams, uh-oh.
Yeah, we lost
Bad things could happen.
a retired Air Force pilot on his first flight in his Lancer Legacy. And so what we find is the pilot may have a lot of experience, but because they've been building for the last several years, they've been building and not flying.
Right.
And they're not flying that kind of airplane. So,
Right.
and a lot of them are stepping up into an airplane that's a lot of times very different than the airplane that they were flying before. So that's where the qualified pilot steps in. That's where the say, for example, the Lobo instructors or instructors in the RV community step in and help ensure that we have a good, smooth transition into this airplane.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. I mean, we have a pretty, we have several people involved in building them at my home airport, and we've got one guy, and they're all LSA,
Yeah.
little itty bitty airplanes.
Sure.
And they usually ask one of our members there he's a light sport CFI,
Yeah.
and he does a lot of the test flight work for them.
Yeah.
And that makes sense,
Yeah, so we found there was another advisor circular that we worked on was transition training. And we found with the LSA community was a lot of folks were going from very high performance airplane in retirement to a very low performance aircraft that was low performance and high drag. So when you pull the power back, it was literally a rock.
Down it goes.
And so there's, as we said, whether you're going up in performance or down in performance, you really need to get some qualified training so you know how to handle that airplane. And those kinds of things, I think, have been successful. You look at the overall accident data sets that we've been working on in the JAH now for forever, it seems. But over the last 20 years, we've seen the accident rate go below 1 fatal per 100,000 flight hours. When we started out, it was about over 1.1 fatals per 100,000 flight hours. Our goal was to have a 1% improvement per year for 10 years. Okay, so 10% overall.
10% overall.
We blew through that real
Really?
quickly. Yes,
That's
I mean
good.
we just went and we said, well, let's just keep going and see where we end up. And so it has been very successful. The group will continue well after I'm long gone, and we're bringing new people in all the time that are excited about this to help, continue to drive the accident rate down.
So we're down to our last couple minutes. So I want to do a little summary because you have shared so much really good information
Thank
here.
you.
So, and some of it's pretty simple. So one, if you own a GA aircraft that's got a type group,
Right.
join it.
Join it. And if you don't have a type group, we've helped other folks create their own type group.
Right.
Call us.
Associate with people flying the same aircraft.
Right.
That in itself your statistics get better.
Yeah.
2, if you change types of aircraft, whether you move up or whether you move down, get some instruction from an instructor that's got time in that aircraft, right?
Right. And is using a well-recognized syllabus.
All right.
So
Transition syllabus.
Yeah, a good transition syllabus, et cetera.
What's the third one? So we talked about join the group, get training in your aircraft. I guess we should always be training, shouldn't we?
Yes, and always be training, but also we talked about the differences between people that do and people that don't.
Oh, I know the
Okay.
last one I was going to say.
Go ahead.
So the last one was, and we talked about this. So we talked about the people that go
Right.
and the people that don't go. And there is no proven way to get the people that don't go to go other than
Yeah.
inviting them.
Right.
So that happens one at a time, folks, one at a time.
Yeah.
Help save a friend. Help save, a life,
Yeah.
a family's life. These guys that, I don't need that. Well, they probably do, and they may not go the first time you ask them, and they may not go the second time you ask them. But if you can get them there, their mortality rate just went up.
Yeah.
And it's not like it's a big problem, but it is a problem. And why would you take more chances than we need to, right?
Yeah, just, invite your friends. If you belong to an EA chapter and you're having a pancake breakfast, that's a good opportunity to invite somebody over to have some pancakes and sausages with you and sit down and talk about these kinds of things.
I think that's great advice.
Yeah.
Jeff, thanks for coming, man.
Yes, sir.
So safety, that's one of our prime objectives at the Florida Aviation Network. I am Joel Hargis at Sun and Fun, the 50th anniversary. Come out to the show and check us out.